welcome. My name is David Robinson. I am the international cheese buyer for Formaggio Kitchen, and I don't do all of the cheese, the Voyage Fromage classes. I do them once in a while, or whatever we're doing here, tastings. But I do enough of them, and um, this is kind of a fun one. There's particularly because there's a couple of these cheeses that are sort of very near and dear to me. Um, Not that the other ones aren't, but when you build relationships with people, you get used to it. So anyway, so what we are doing this evening is we're doing a little study on rinds. And always, we always talk about rinds and there's a lot of basics going on. However, this is sort of a focus on rind in a different way. We're going to talk about specific rinds, but also sort of in a slightly different way, or not the typical format that you might see these. So first and foremost, to explain what a rind is, if it's not quite clear, right? Cheese, if you let a cheese age, it almost doesn't matter what that cheese is. It's going to essentially try to protect itself. So if you let curd sit there, it's going to start, molds are going to grow, different bacteria are going to react with whatever inside the cheese to cover the outside of it to protect it. So that way the inside doesn't go bad while the outside sort of protects itself. If anybody's had a leftover piece of brie in their refrigerator and you notice sometimes one of the sides starts to develop that white mold, that's all that cheese is doing is it protecting itself. So the rind is a natural thing. It's all part of the cheese. There is no there's no difference in what the makeup of is that cheese between the rind and the paste. However, it's a reaction of what's going on with the air outside. If it was in a cave, if it aged a little bit differently, that sort of ends up with different qualities. Okay, so we brought in 4 cheeses today that, to me, a couple things. One, it's a little bit lighter. It's getting hotter outside, so I didn't want anything too overly unctuous and too overly heavy. It's that time of year of light cheeses, but they're all sort of varying, or a couple of these are varying degrees of similar rinds, and then it's entirely different. So we're going to start by, before we taste, a very quick definition of how I describe rinds with a sort of a lead into what we're tasting. So when we start tasting, the very first cheese we're going to be tasting is going to be the Blakesville Lake Breeze. That's the little half wheel goat cheese, sort of fresh on the inside with the rind. This is what is sort of commonly called in the cheese world a fresh aged cheese. So the paste is fairly young and fresh. It's aged to the point just where a rind can start growing in a little bit. The rind in it, we'll get into more detail in a second, is called Geotrichum. Geotrichum rind is usually formed on these smaller format cheeses, particularly a lot of goat cheeses from the Loire Valley. Robiolas, a lot of robiolas in Italy get these as well. And it's a very particular penicillium that grows to protect it again. Usually on younger, but as it ages, it hardens and it loses that sort of slight brainy texture that you see. The next, after that, we're going to taste the Delice Rougemont, which is sort of that brie style cheese. That is a Candidum rind. So Candidum is another penicillium that's often used or mostly used in camemberts and bries. A lot of U.S. cheesemakers use it as well. It's a fairly common rind, but that rind is referred. There's 2 terms we use. One is a lactic rind and one is a bloomy rind. We'll get into more details in a second. After that, we start getting into wash rinds, which will be the 3rd cheese, the Tome de Verbier, that we'll try. And wash rinds are sort of exactly what it sounds like. They're rinds where you take some substance. In this case, it'll be a little bit of brine. You rub the outside of it and let it age that way, and it sort of gains different properties. And then the last rind that we're going to be discussing today is what is called a natural rind. There are different levels and there's different qualities of natural rind, and there are several meanings. the one that we're doing or tasting is going to be one. It's interesting because this style of sheep milk cheese pecorino from Italy is not commonly found in the U.S., particularly from Lazio, where this is from. And this rind, which is all edible, is a sort of, it's not a unique rind to Italy. It's a unique rind that we get and end up getting here, and different from natural rinds you might see elsewhere. So beyond that, rinds can be, you can add salt, you can add liquor, you can let them age. Natural rinds often mean you let different molds grow on them. There's all sorts of different ways to get the rind. But again, I stress this, I can't stress this enough. It is exactly the same as the paste. So there's no different. If it doesn't mean that it tastes the same, but it does mean that it is the same quality of cheese. Without the rinds, we can't have aged cheeses of any sort, of any ilk. If you have a 20-day-old mozzarella that's sitting out, it's going to grow rind, and it's not the same cheese as it was. So as the rind grows, it will help the cheese to age and protect it. So one, as I always say, if you guys have questions, please pipe up and don't be shy. If you're drinking anything, this is a selection where I would do rosé, or in this case, I'm actually doing some sherry, just because I was in that mood. Sherry is good for everything. But the selection we chose today is easy to pair with a lot of summer wines, whites, rosés, even some orange wines, and even a good sort of crisp beer. So whatever you're drinking, enjoy that, and we'll talk about, we can add that in if we want. But so let's start out by first tasting the Blakesville Lake Breeze. So first off, Blakesville Creamery is a small creamery in Michigan. It started in 2020 by a woman named Linda Uline, who had been her family was dairy farmers, cow farmers in Wisconsin. It was always sort of in her blood, if you will, to raise animals, but she wanted to do something very sustainable and ended up raising goats. That became her thing. So they have a completely sustainable farm. They're raising Saanen goats, which if we've talked about in the past, originally came up through brought into Europe by the Moors, and is one of the most common breeds in France specifically. But these produce they're great dairy goats, and this has again that Geotrichum rind. So the woman who makes this, her name is Veronica Pedroza, who is a, I don't even know if you can call her a rising star at this point. She's been around for a while, making cheese in the U.S., but she's one, I would call her one of the top cheese makers in the U.S. She can do things that nobody else does. This is sort of loosely based on European style cheeses, particularly with the rind, but it's its own unique product. So the cheese is only aged, I believe, between 20 to 25 days. So it loses some of the moisture, but keeps just enough to have that wonderful texture. And that Geotrichum rind just starts to form. So Geotrichum, as I mentioned earlier, is a type of penicillium. So the calling card, or the typical features of Geotrichum, is that it's basically the penicillium is on the outside, and it's starting to grow and develop a rind, right? So if you look at the cheese on the inside, it's super bright white, and then there's that little bit of cream layer on the outside where the rind has a different color. So that as that rind grows, it's going to first sort of gain that little sort of wavy quality. That will eventually sort of harden up and then protect the inside. This cheese will age from the outside in. So the very dead center of this will taste a little bit different than the outer edge, right? And this is not true of all cheeses that age. Most cheeses don't age quite that way. And so when you taste it, there's several ways to taste this. Personally, I like it with the rind, so I'll always eat it that way. However, in tasting it, do yourself a favor and taste just the paste, and then taste, if you can, just taste the rind. You'll notice a massive difference, and then taste them together, and it'll sort of be a very different experience. Geotrichum rinds really, as I mentioned earlier, are very common in goat cheeses from France, particularly Loire Valley. And I don't know, I don't know for sure if that's where the very first Geotrichum rinds were developed, but that's where they certainly were perfected and cultivated. And everybody in the Loire Valley who produces goat cheeses always produces at a young age and sells them generally frais or young, unaged, or affiné, which is aged where that rind is developed. And depending on where you are, and this is different everywhere in Europe, it doesn't matter if it's France or Italy or anywhere else making these rinds, every local has their thing. And a lot of times when you see these Geotrichum rinds, when they start to form, cheesemakers will let them age to the point where the inside is really firm, and the outside has sort of lost all that sort of brainy, wavy quality to it, but it maintains a flavor. They want it super aged. Veronica has chosen, and I think it's absolutely correct in this, to age this to a young age and sell it immediately. If this ages for too long, it changes too much, but it's really wonderful. It's very fresh. It is. There are similarities to European, to particularly the Loire Valley cheeses, but it's unique in its own flavor, and a recipe is a little bit different. It's really wonderful. Sorry, I got a chance to taste as well sometimes. But if you'll notice, what the rind brings to this is a real sort of strong depth to it. So because Geotrichum tends to be on these cheeses that are younger, that outer layer of the rind can be much more different and significantly stronger than the center, which is why I recommend tasting them both, but having them together really changes. Oftentimes you will see the cream layers, what that edge is called, get very significant, and you'll see sort of a layer where it'll be dense in the center and it'll look almost like a brie, and then it'll be the rind. All that is natural, as is this rind. Is the presence of the penicillium is natural, and so once it starts going, that's it. It's always going to be there. It's a really wonderful thing. You can have Geotrichum rinds that are bigger than this, or more sort of prevalent, but they're always, to me, they make a really wonderful cheese. Of goat cheeses, it's generally my favorite style of goat cheeses with Geotrichum. Do you have any questions, any thoughts on this cheese so far? Do we like it?
I really like this cheese. I could eat it all day.
Yeah.
Just spread it on a piece of bread and put some fruit on it for breakfast.
Exactly.
It will be our breakfast tomorrow for sure.
I hate to use the words simple, because I don't think that's fair to a cheese, but it's easy cheese to eat. It's easy cheese to enjoy. I don't feel like it's going to get in the way of too many things. It doesn't have that quote unquote goaty flavor that a lot of people are afraid of, I think, with goats. It's super clean. And again, I agree, for toast some good bread with butter and then spread this on after. It's impeccable. It really is.
Yeah, and I think during our unsupervised period, I might have tried all the cheeses, and
that's okay.
And okay, good. I'm glad that's okay. It was unsupervised, and that's not my fault. But this is actually my favorite, which I'm kind of disappointed in myself that I went for. You brought me all these things from all over the world, and I'm going for the one in Wisconsin. I live in Indiana. I mean, what am I doing? Like, no.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I said she was in Michigan. She is in Wisconsin. My apologies. You know what? I am somebody who loves European cheeses, who will almost never recommend domestic stuff, and I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but I agree. This is a really lovely cheese. It is, and I do recommend this. I promise. So I get you. All right. So moving on, The next cheese we're going to taste again is the Délice Rougemont. So that's that brie looking cheese. And this is a cheese that I love for a lot of reasons. One is I like the style, I like the flavor profile in this style because it's, to me, entirely different than anything of this sort of ilk. So the easiest way to describe it is we usually say it's a brie style cheese made in Switzerland, right? That's an easy way to brush it aside. As I mentioned earlier, that rind is called a bloomy rind or lactic rind. And what happens before we get into the cheese, and again, try it if you haven't, and try the rind separately, try the paste, and then try them together. But with these bloomy lactic rinds, these are cheeses that, for the most part, the curds have been cut a little bit, so there's a lot of moisture inside of the rind. And as soon as they're taken out of the mold, of their mold, so that they're set, the penicillium sort of kicks in, and it starts growing almost immediately. And so that white coloring is natural, but it will produce, as it ages, almost like a white fuzz. So you'll start to see that layer. My piece is starting to break apart a little bit as we're sitting out. So that layer, will start to form, very minor, very, very thin, and it'll stay thin for most of the time. And then a white fuzz, which is all part of the same thing, penicillium, will start to sort of grow over it. If you ever get a piece of brie and it seems like it's fluffy, there's nothing to worry about. That's penicillium just acting and not being pushed down. So cheesemakers will, for the most part, let that go and not worry about it because it's not going to do anything. But again, like the Geotrichum, this is protecting the outside as it ages. Now, for the most part, when you get a Candidum rind like this, is that it will protect it, and then the cheese will essentially, between the rinds, age almost exactly the same. You'll get very, very minor differences in textures between the center or the top or the outside. So you get a very similar texture. When it's very young, you might see a little different, but once that cream happens, it's all over. It's the whole thing. So this cheese specifically, Délice Rougemont, is one unique to, we're the only people who sell it in the US, so you won't see this outside of Formaggio kitchen. And you'd be sort of hard pressed to see this cheese in Switzerland outside of a few areas. So like Blakesville Creamery with Veronica Pedroza, this cheese is made by a gentleman named Michel Beirut. And Michel is, I think he's in his late 40s now, but when he started making cheese, he became a rising star in Switzerland. A very brief history in Switzerland cheese is that for a long time, there was what is referred to as the cheese mafia. That it was a consortium that dictated what cheesemakers would make in certain areas in Switzerland, and that's all they could make. They weren't allowed to make cheeses like this. So when that sort of dissolved, cheesemaking in Switzerland took off, and eventually Michel Beirut sort of started doing his thing. There were other people making cheeses, softer cheeses. He just is better than anybody as far as I can tell. I think what he does is absolutely amazing. So he is not a farmer. He does not own his own cows. Rougemont is a little village that he has his dairy in, that he makes the cheese. It is sort of south of Gruyere in the mountains. These are not Alps like we're not talking 13, 14,000 foot peaks. This is the lower Alps, sort of just south of Gruyere, just over the hills of north of Lake Geneva. And basically all the farmers that he worked with during summer months, or spring, summer into fall, it's all outdoor grazing. There's no silage. It is some of the cleanest milk, and the only reason I say that is because this cheese to me is so milky and lactic. It has a little strength now, but not a lot. You can still taste, to me, the grass. this cheese has that sort of super, it's lactic in that it tastes of the milk. I've tasted this cheese in that sort of like 5 to 10 day range just as it starts to form, and it tastes like it's just out of the udder. And as it ages, you get all that sort of particularly grass. And if you get it in the wintertime, you get that hay. And again, it's all hay that's sort of grown right there. So everything is very local. So Michel ages his cheese in an old abandoned fort in the Swiss Alps, or in the mountains. And when he bought the fort and took over the fort, I think it was 8 or 9 years ago. Because he was aging these younger cheeses like this, the penicillium, the candidum sort of took off, and so the room that this is aged in, they are constantly cleaning the walls. It's this, fort that's built into the mountain. There's a lot of moisture, and anything that takes, it takes. So he's got a room where basically he said that if they don't scrape it, there's candidum growing on the walls, it's growing on the ceiling, and it sort of overtakes everything to the point that he thinks it's detrimental. So they're constantly cleaning it and takes it over. That way he feels the more he cleans it, that the candidum doesn't take over everything, and it sort of helps have a sort of slightly more delicate rind. Now, I'm going to be honest, we get this, he sends it, it's about 10 to 12 or 10 to 15 days when he sends it. We're getting a few weeks later. So the rind has developed a little bit more what you're tasting here than you might get from his cave. But still, it's for the age of what this is, the rind is still fairly delicate. Now, again, there's a little bit of strength to this comparatively, but it does taste very much what the milk tastes like. Interesting fact about candidum molds, penicillium. So candidum is the penicillium that is sort of responsible for, was originally responsible for what became Camemberti penicillium, and which is used in brie and camemberts a lot. They sort of mix and match. But these are molds that, when used in the same environment, eventually die off. And there is a fear, particularly in camembert, this is where the biggest fear is, that these molds and these penicilliums are going to die off. We're going to lose them, and camemberts in the future, bries in the future, and cheeses like this in the future are going to taste different, because once that strain dies off, you can't reproduce it. And if somebody is reproducing it scientifically, nobody wants, or at least nobody, as far as I can tell, in the cheese world wants any part of it. They want their natural molds and penicilliums to do what they do. Sorry, while I taste for a second. Interesting. So to me, that's interesting. Again, it's a little stronger than we get it sometimes, but it's mushroomy and it's grassy at the same time. And it actually sort of smells or tastes like it smells in the cave. It's actually pretty interesting. It's not a common cheese to get in Switzerland of this ilk, of this rind. And so it's very unique and it's fun to get in that respect. What do we think of that, out of curiosity?
The first taste, all I tasted was asparagus.
Okay. Yep.
That's all I could taste. And I loved it. I love asparagus, so it was great. I thought it was great. Very grassy.
Very grassy. Now, it's interesting when you say asparagus, because asparagus is, if you ever do wine tasting, the one food you should always avoid, or two foods you should avoid, are asparagus and artichokes. Those are foods that really can mess up the taste buds, particularly wine. However, with cheese of this style, when you get asparagus, it's a flavor it doesn't do the same thing. So it's getting that flavor and you can still have it with wine. It's still good.
It was wonderful. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's really fun. Like I said, I love this. we get small amounts of this as a whole, and so we don't have it all the time. But usually when we get it, it is, or often not usually. Oftentimes we get it, and it's the texture hasn't started to get creamy yet, and it varies so much. It's in really good ways. It's a lot of fun. I really like it in this stage. It's great. It's a unique cheese. It's fun with a little bit of strength, but not over the top.
No, it's good.
Good. Glad we're enjoying it. All right, the third cheese again we're tasting is a Tome de Verbier. So that's this lightly washed rind.
This one.
And we're staying in Switzerland for this. So several years ago, when we were starting to look for new Swiss cheese, we traveled into the Valais, which is in the southern part of Switzerland, where there's a lot of ski resorts and over. And we stopped in Verbier. Verbier, if you are a skier and you ski in the Alps, you will know Verbier. Wonderful village, great skiing. But there is a little creamery, a little lattery in the center, almost in the center of the village.
Very mild.
And what's that?
Oops, sorry, hon.
No, it's good. So there's little creamery in the center of town, and we decided to go in. It was sort of the middle of the afternoon, and it was open, but it didn't really feel like it was open. So we start talking to the guy. Comes up, his name is Roger, and we start talking to Roger, and figure out he's a cheesemaker. He also, if we want to buy cheese, he sells it. We start talking to him, and eventually sort of realizes that we are involved. We start talking, we're interested in cheese. You produce raclette, that's obvious. So he just takes us in and shows us operation. We taste a bunch of cheeses with him. Sort of goes from there. It's a really amazing experience. Sort of a fun fact on this is, he's talking about how proud he is of the milk he uses. And again, he's not a farmer. He's a cheesemaker, and that's it. And so he buys his cheese from 9 different farmers who are high elevation and in the valley, so it's mixed. And when they bring it in every day, he tests everything, lets it sit, and then when he knows what's going on, that's when he decides to make cheese. And if something isn't right, he won't use it, he won't pretend. And that's any imperfection at all. If something is slightly off, it's not getting used to make cheese, and he won't do it. So he's a perfectionist. He gets in, he has all these milk samples he's showing us. These are great. And then he pulls out one, and the color was off on it after he put his test in it. He sort of does this lamenting thing. I'm not using that. So we sort of watched it in real time. We actually even tasted some of this milk, and he's like, look, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not good for cheese. So he will end up, if he can use it, he'll make yogurt out of it, whatever. But anyway, so we go and we taste his raclette, and everything's great, wonderful. We start the business, we want to buy from you, etc. But as we're sort of in his little cheese shop, which is, a small kitchen essentially, there's one cheese that it's just sort of sitting there, and we're like, well, what is that? It looks like a Reblochon. He's like, oh, I make that. When I have leftover milk, I make this cheese. It's a Tome. Whatever. It's okay, great. So we asked him about it. It's funny, he has a bunch frozen, and he's got some not frozen, and we tasted it. It's fantastic. So we decided to buy this cheese, and the more we learn about it, the more we're fascinated by it. This is, if you're familiar, if you've been to the Savoie or been in France and you've had Reblochon, the Reblochon is a cheese that traditionally was made from leftover milk and made in the evening. These young cheeses that were aged about 28 to 35 days, they're eaten young. So essentially he's doing the same thing. When he has leftover milk in the evening, he decides to make this small Tome. He can make anywhere from 2 to 10 a day, depending, or none. If there's no milk, he doesn't make it. It's a secondary product. So he makes it like Reblochon, and he cuts the curds sort of big-ish, so there's a lot of liquid left in, puts them in the mold, and as soon as they're set, he starts washing them with a salt brine. Now, wash rind cheeses, which Poisse is probably the most famous. Usually, when people say wash rind, you end up with these really unctuous, strong smelling and strong tasting cheeses. And so he's made a point of adding less brine to this and doing it a little less often for two reasons. One is so that the rind doesn't grow too strong, because as you add more brine, the rind will get a little bit thicker because you're pulling more moisture out, and it's going to start drying out the little bit. And the other reason is that he doesn't want too much of the aroma. So it gets washed for about almost every day for about the first 5 days, and then he slows it down and does it about another 5 days later, and then sort of goes from there. He'll age this as minimum as 10 days. He will sell it to us at about 15 to 20 days, just as the rind he feels is right. It sort of builds in a little bit of time, and it's okay. The reason he doesn't sell it past about 20 to 25 days is that he literally, again, I mentioned this, he throws it in the freezer. He's the only cheesemaker I've ever seen do this. I don't recommend it of any cheese. However, he does it, and it seems to be good. I've asked him if he sends us frozen cheeses. He swears he doesn't. I believe him. But it's really amazing. So this is unpasteurized milk. It's very young. This milk is from, I think it actually mentioned, the reason I'm going to bring it up, in your little card, it says that this is from a breed called Ras d'Iran. So d'Iran is this breed of cow that is, they don't know exactly where it came from. It is raised mostly in southern Switzerland, around the Valais, a little bit in the Val d'Aosta in Italy, and then a few random farmers elsewhere, Spain in particular, and I think a couple of other parts of France, but it's not common. Now, what's unique about this breed is, one, the milk is very rich. It's not that it has more fat than other cow's milk, but it produces extremely rich cheeses. The best raclettes you get come from the milk of these cows. But it is a cow that sort of lives in communities in this way, is that there is a leader of the herd of cows every year, and that leader will change. They call it the queen. And so every year when the cows are being brought out from the barns and being kept mostly indoor during the winter, and again, this is a Valais, so there's snow usually from September at some point until oftentimes into May. When they're brought out into the pastures, all the cows will essentially, they're going to pick their own queen to lead the herd for that season, and they will battle it out. And so they will, what used to happen is you'd get the herd out and cows would literally just start butting heads. Cows could die. They will do this till the bitter end. Now farmers will let them out. They'll let the cows sort of butt heads a little bit until one asserts dominance, and then stop anything before it gets violent. And then for the entire summer, these cows will essentially follow this queen anywhere and everywhere. She is it. She's the one. At the end of the year, they go back into pasture. Things settle down. Next spring, they'll start all over again. It could be the same queen. It could be different. This is not a great thing. It's a weird thing to me, but there are contests in Switzerland and in Italy where they actually figure out who has the queen of all of these cows, in different countries will bring their queen. Again, there's no death. It's odd to me, but it's a tradition that's been going on for, as far as I know, hundreds of years, or at least the last 150 years that they do. But it's a really unique race or a breed of cow. So what's interesting is when this we're visiting, there was, a couple of us, and we had our old GM at the time, and we ended up in a pasture with a bunch of calves, and the calves are always separated because you don't want any queen or any adult cow sort of mingling, and they will assert dominance on these calves. So the calves sort of are there, and we had our old GM, and she's standing in this, and these cows started coming up to her, surrounding her, and as we walked out, all sort of got in a path. I don't have the photo anymore, but there's a photo of her walking with about 10 calves followed behind her as she's walking out. And then when we left, they all just sort of stood by the wires, by the fence, and just confused. It was very interesting. But in any case, they are the cows that are giving us the milk that produced this really wonderful cheese. That's sort of, to me, complex and light, and so many things going on. Again, this is a light brine on it, so it's not overly unctuous. The one thing that is happening on a wash rind like this is that when you add the salt and the brine to it, as the rind starts to age and protect itself and grow, it spurs the growth of Brevibacterium linens, or B linens. And B linens is where there's two things that happen. You get a little bit of aroma. If you have a pois or a rotten apple or your socks and they smell, those are Brevibacterium linens. They're all the same. But it also sort of gives it that little bit of texture that's going on. You'll notice it's not a super smooth texture. It almost feels like there's a graininess to it. And that's the Brevibacterium linens reacting with the salt that's going on, whatever, to sort of help create that specific texture on the rind. If you do let this age, which once in a while we do, if we have, it's sometimes intentional, sometimes a little bit less, it does get pretty aromatic, but always delicious. Now, there's a lot of words in there. What do we think of this cheese? How do we like it?
Go ahead. No, you tell me.
I really like the rind on this cheese a lot.
Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really enjoyable.
Go ahead.
The style of rind that is, again?
So it's a wash rind.
It's a wash rind.
It's a wash rind, yes. But it's just, as opposed to other wash rinds you get, like, again, I'll mention it, Pois or Taleggio is a good example. He's washing it less so it doesn't get too aromatic. He still wants the paste to be the star of the show, because a lot of times you get a wash rind and they will overpower.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I believe, a quick side note, you guys have mostarda is your condiment with this, yes? Right? What flavor is it, Morgan?
1 second. Let me.
Was it the Montavana or was it?
Yeah, that one.
So, to me, this is an interesting cheese in that the stronger it gets, that it'll go a little bit better with the mostarda. But I really like the fresh sort of lactic quality of these last few cheeses with the mostarda. Mostarda has a little bit of spice, strong fruit. It's really wonderful. With the next cheese, we'll talk about it a little more because I think it's going to enhance it a little bit more. Any questions about that before we move on to our final cheese? All right, awesome. So the last cheese we're tasting is the Pecorino Borgo Antico, right? Borgo Antico, which sort of loosely translates to old house or traditional house in some interpretations, is a style of Pecorino that has been made for a long time, did not always get out of Lazio or their small or anywhere in Italy. Pecorino Romano, which everybody knows, and Pecorino Antico Borgo are not even remotely the same style of Pecorino, right? Pecorino just means sheep or little sheep specifically. So And even though Pecorino Romano originally is from Lazio, these share no commonality except for the fact that they're sheep. So this is what is referred to as a natural rind. Now, there are different forms of natural rinds in the Savoie. They'll let the molds grow and tamp them down, so you get sort of a grayish rind. In this case, this type of natural rind is a rind that, as it's aging, right, it forms. They put a little salt on it, and they put dry salt, which helps sort of draw a little bit of moisture out, but it also helps to get that texture a little bit firmer. And then as soon as it starts to age, they rub olive oil, sometimes lard, but this is they use olive oil. Traditionally, they would always be lard. Again, this is olive oil though. They start rubbing olive oil on it, which does a couple things. Is it helps keep the rind moist, because this is done in a fairly cold cave where the humidity level is low, and so you risk having that rind dry out. So by rubbing the oil on it, it helps keep that moist, and then it lets it just form. So as firm as this rind is, it's completely edible, and to me, it adds sort of just an extra element to this. So when it comes to firmer rinds, my mantra is always this: if you can eat it, eat it. If it's not enhancing the flavor of it, stop eating it. This one, I feel it does, but I want you to taste it. You know, obviously, this one I wouldn't taste on its own. Taste this with the rest of the paste, because in that case, it'll be, to me, a little more. It's better. It's better in that case. You know, the paste is slightly dry with a little bit of moisture on it, but it is young. This cheese is only aged about 4 months. I think we've gotten as old as 6 months, but for the most part, it's around 3 to 4 months when we get it. So that's why the texture is what it is. They put them in sort of they put them in molds that are not they're not traditional molds, in that they're not perfectly round. They're handmade straw molds. They're handmade plastic molds, because there's not straw in this anymore. You'd be able to tell that just sort of let it go. And so you end up with these weird oblong shapes, sort of the way they always used to do. The only difference between this cheese now and a couple hundred years ago is that they use plastic molds as opposed to straw. This particular cheese is made in a small commune called Santo Donato. And if you're from Boston, you have met Italians from this area. It's an area that the second wave of Italian immigration in the 50s is when people from this area emigrated into the U.S. And so there's large communities within Boston, not in Little Italy here, but sort of outside that when I've given them this cheese, it's like, particularly the older generations. I used to rent from somebody from this area, and he was blown away because it was just like home to him, and never seen it outside of there. And, it's not something you see very often. So it's unique in that respect. And again, this rind is something that is sort of an older traditional rind that to me is meant to be eaten. And it should always, if you don't like it, fine, but always try it. All right, I tried to fit a lot of that, a lot of words into a small amount of time. But what one did we like that cheese as well? Because I love this pecorino, I really do. Any thoughts on it?
How does it go with pasta?
Good. However, when it's this age, I would wait. I would wait till it was a little bit older. And the reason is, to me, it's not as super strong cheese, right? You notice the salt is kind of minimal. It's not old enough for it to go onto pasta to me. When we've gotten it's a little bit older and I can shave it a little better, I like that. However, I've put this in salads when it's this fresh, and I think it's fantastic in that way. I've done it with arugula, although I've done it with other greens as well. That's what I prefer it with cooking, or when it's this age. It's really good. So as I mentioned, with the mostarda, to me, this is a really easy pairing. The texture of this, to me, and the mostarda, to me, I love that sort of slightly firm with mostarda. The little bit of sort of strong sheepy quality to this, the what they call lanolin, that's the fat or compound in sheep fat that sort of gives this sort of sheepy quality to it. Lends itself, almost a gamey quality, for lack of a better word, lends itself to those strong flavors of the mostarda. To me, that's a match made in heaven. It really is.
You said they rinse or wash this rind with olive oil. Do they
Correct.
do that all during the process? Because if it's wrapped in plastic, how do they?
Sorry. So the mold. I'll start over on that. The mold that they put the curds in, that's plastic. Once it's set, they take it out of the plastic. They start aging it.
Okay.
Sorry about the confusion. So once, right, again, they start with rock salt. It goes out of the mold. They start with rock salt, just so the rind starts to form, and then they start adding oil. I don't know exactly how often they do it. I think it's sort of a feel sort of thing. You know, if during the summer it's going to be one thing, during the winter it's a little different. They're applying it as it's needed. So at some point they stop because you need to let the rind solidify and the cheese ripen correctly. But for the first couple months, it is applied periodically. So, and we use the word wash. It's technically not washed in olive oil. It's covered in it. Like it's not the right wording, but yes, it is washed in olive oil as well. I guess that's a good way to say it. Do we like this cheese though? Because I said I love this cheese.
Very much so. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, the rind was phenomenal in this one. I really enjoyed it.
Isn't that interesting? I want to say when I started eating cheeses a lot and I came up with rinds like this, I hesitated to sort of get into them a little bit. And then when you get the right one, which to me this is, it's really phenomenal. It's really wonderful. You can sort of tell how clean and how like amazing their caves must be, simply because there's no funk on that outer layer. And a lot of times with natural rinds, there is some funk. It's the cave, there's molds, there's this, there's that. And to me, this is a very clean, sort of pristine rind that doesn't add a funky quality to it. And the texture is just soft enough.
Yeah, I really like the texture of this pecorino. Often the ones I have had is more hard. I know there are some very soft ones, but
yeah,
I really like this would be great on a pasta or something like that. Obviously, it's good by itself too.
Yeah, like I mean, the flavor is great. Like I said, when this ages, if we get a wheel and you know, when you're dealing with small producers like this, we don't always have the option of saying I want older. I get what I get, and that's, you know, when we get these aged, they are absolutely amazing. They're so fantastic for pasta specifically. Like that's where I love it on pasta. But I also like eating those on my own as well. But does anybody have any questions? Again, I know that I sort of, partly because we started late and I was frazzled a little bit, I sort of went off the bat really fast. Does anybody have any questions that wasn't quite answered, or that you're not sure about any of the cheeses or any cheese in particular?
I have a short question. So,
yeah.
In overall, when we get cheeses from you guys, do you recommend that we put them out for a few hours before, so that they develop their flavors fully, or what do you recommend?
I do actually. So, the best way to eat cheese is when it's at room temperature, or maybe a tick under, but not much under. It's you get the full experience when it's a little warmer. What I found is some of this is slightly dependent on, your living, how hot or warm it is, and the texture of the cheese. Like I pulled my cheeses out and what time? At about 4:30. I have the windows open. It's a little humid. It's Boston. It's humid. It's not hot, but it's warm. I probably could have done the softer cheeses a little bit later because they would have warmed up fine. The pecorino to me is absolutely perfect just because it's that right temperature. The longer you can leave them out, the better the experience is. If it's going to run all over like my soft cheeses you're doing right now, you might want to wait, but don't wait give it at least an hour minimum. They're always going to be better when they're room temperature.
Would there be any cheese that you would have directly out of the refrigerator and you would say, yeah, that's fantastic? What you mean where that's a benefit, basically?
Straight out of the refrigerator?
Yeah.
Mozzarella, honestly. To me, you get a fresh mozzarella, you get it when it's cold, you sprinkle a little salt, some black pepper, and some olive oil. It's fantastic, and I like that when it's cold. There are times when I think of a blue cheese often is a little bit nicer when it's still cold. I don't know why that is. There's something about the texture of it that I like when it's still cold.
Mm-hmm.
But the flavors do come out more when they're not cold. Mozzarella is so mild it almost doesn't even matter. Mozzarella is about the freshness more than it is anything else.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the only one I specifically say cold, always.
Yeah.
Which I will plug that next month is going to be from a local producer, Mozzarella House. So we're going to have a whole range of different types of mozzarella.
Of which those ones, leave them cold till about 15 to 20 minutes before. Do we have any other questions? Well,
Just
as
a comment.
always,
Just a
thank
little
you guys
comment.
so much.
Sometime I'd love to hear how you guys suss out cheeses on a trip.
Well, you know what? I'll talk with Julia and we'll figure out how to do that, how to get that into a class correctly.
Yeah, I'd just be intrigued about how you go about finding a cheese, especially when you talk about talking to the guy in the store. And
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, and sometimes there's a little bit of luck involved, and what I appreciate about what we do is that, and we try to aim for this. We look for producers who sort of we can stand behind and products we can stand behind, and it's not always about money. Actually, more often than not, it's not about money. They don't care. It's a lot of what we do is built on the fact that they believe we can do right by their product. That's the main thing. When we talk to Roger, and now we deal with Roger's son Mark, they trust us, they believe us, and that makes it worthwhile for them. So we'll do that for another, we will do a class where we can sort of get into that a little bit more and maybe have a couple longer videos of interactions we've had. So we'll figure that out. Anyways, everybody, thank you guys so much.